Hello Gators, this is 2.8, the product rule, 2.9, the quotient rule. While the derivative of the sum of two functions is the sum of their derivatives, and the derivative of the difference of two functions is the difference of the derivatives, the derivative of the product of two functions is not the product of the derivatives. For example, the derivative of x times x is x squared, derivative of x squared, which is 2x. This is the correct answer. But if you were to take the derivative of each part of this product, the answer would be 1, and 1 is not the correct answer. So unfortunately, the product rule doesn't act like the sum rule or the difference rule. In fact, this is the way it acts. The derivative of a product is the first function times the derivative of the second plus the second function times the derivative of the first. In the next slide, I'm going to prove it by using the definition of the derivative. I'm going to take this function and put x plus h in it, and then take this function and just put x in it, and then divide it by h. And this is the way it looks. Okay, so this u times v with the x plus h, that's this part right here, minus u of x, v of x, that's this part right here, all divided by h. Now to do the proof, what I'm going to do is I'm going to add 0. Adding 0 means I'm going to subtract, and I'm going to add the same thing. Subtracting and adding the same thing means you're just adding 0. I'm going to take this quantity and separate it from the fraction over h, and then I'm going to take this part and separate the fraction and put it over here. All right, now they have something in common, these two. That's u of x plus h. So I'm going to factor that out. That's called the greatest common factor. And this is what I have left. And out of these two, the greatest common factor is v of x. And then I have this. All right, so I have a limit of the sum. And it's the sum of the limits. And I have a product. And I'm going to take the limit of the product. So as I take the limit here, this h goes to 0, and I have u right here. And then this is the derivative of v. And then I have v of x, which is right here, and then the derivative of u. So let me write this out a little bit more simply. It's the first function times the derivative of the second plus the second function times the derivative of the first. So each one is taking its turn at being a derivative. All right, these are the two functions. Let's go ahead and demonstrate f prime of x. And I'm going to leave the first one alone, times by the second, the derivative of the second, which is cosine x, plus, leave the first one alone, sine of x, our second one alone, that's this one right here, g, and take the derivative of this, which is 8. Now instead of putting it at the behind, I'm going to put 8 in the front like that, and now I'm done. Let's do it again. Here's the first function, here's the second function. Now remember, the second function is x to the 1/2 power. If you need to do a power, you can go ahead and do that. So g prime of x is equal to the first function times the derivative of the second, use the power rule, so it'll be 1/2 x to the negative 1/2 power, which I know is just root x in the denominator, plus, now I'm going to have the second function, which is root x, and I'm going to times it by the derivative of the first, which is 2e to the x. And I can put it in the front, or I don't like putting it in the back because I don't like to put anything behind a radical. I'd like you to pause the screencast and see if you can do number 3 on your own, and you'll see the answer. And here is the answer. Let's go ahead and practice with a table. I'm going to figure out the derivative first, and then I'll evaluate it at 2. So here's my first function. Leave it alone, 3f of x times the derivative of the second function plus the second function times the derivative of the first. Now I'm going to evaluate it at 2. So everywhere there's an x, I'm going to put the number 2 in there. All right, now I'm going to be ready to use my table to evaluate. So this is 3 times f of 2, that's this, that is going to be a 4, times g prime of 2, and that'll be a 2, plus g of 2 is negative 1, times 3 times f prime of 2, which is negative 2. So this is going to be 24, and then this is going to be plus 6, and so the answer is 30. Take a minute to stop the screencast and see if you can do the second one. And here's the answer. All right, the quotient rule is also a difficult rule. It's not the way you'd like it. You can't take the derivative of the numerator and then the derivative of the denominator. That isn't possible. What it is in the numerator, it's the denominator times the derivative of the numerator minus the numerator times the derivative of the denominator, all divided by the denominator squared. All right, I'm going to prove it to you. The same idea. I am going to put x plus h in both of these functions. I'm doing this part right here, minus u of x over v of x, which is this part right here, all divided by h. Now, the first step is to get a common denominator, and that's what I have right here, my common denominator. I'm going to do what I just did a few minutes ago. I'm going to add 0. I'm going to subtract a quantity and add that quantity, so I haven't changed anything. I am going to separate the fraction. I'm going to take these two numerators and separate the fraction, putting this h up in the numerator. And then I'm going to take this, separate it into another fraction, and I'm going to use h in the numerator here as well. So I've separated these two, and then it has this denominator down here. So I'm going to take a limit of each one of these parts right here. And this doesn't have an h, so it's just u. This is the derivative of, this is b, and this is the derivative of u, minus, here's u, and here's the derivative of v, all over, and then this h goes to 0, and this will be v squared. All right, let's go ahead and write it in shorthand notation here. So this is the denominator times the derivative of the numerator minus the numerator times the derivative of the denominator all over the denominator squared. Okay, let's go ahead and use this. Y prime equals, I'm going to take my denominator, 3x plus 1, derivative of the numerator, which is 4x, minus 2x squared times the derivative of the denominator, which is 3, all over 3x plus 1 squared. And I'm going to get 12x squared. This is going to be negative 6x squared, so this will be a 6x squared plus 4x, all divided by 3x plus 1 quantity squared. Okay, I'd like you to stop the screencast and see if you can do number 2. And here's the answer to number 2. The quotient rule is something that you probably need to see more examples, so let's do another example. And I'm going to do h prime of x, and I'm going to do the denominator times the derivative of the numerator, which is cosine x, minus the numerator which is sine of x, and then derivative of the denominator, which is 4x. I like to put that in front of the sign, all over 2x squared minus 5 quantity squared. Okay, and we can leave it that way, or you can distribute. I don't think there's very much you can put together here. Okay, stop the screencast and see if you can do number 4. Okay, there's a big surprise. You didn't have to use the quotient rule, because we could have separated these two fractions and then it was just a power rule, so this is the answer. Just in case you ended up using the quotient rule, it would have looked something like this and you would have got the same answer. So beware, sometimes you don't need to use a quotient rule. Let's go ahead and use a table here. So let's go ahead and find the derivative and then I'll evaluate it. So my denominator I write down here, times the derivative of the numerator minus the numerator times the derivative of the denominator all over the denominator square. So that'll be 9 g of x quantity squared. Okay, now I want to evaluate it at 2. So this will be 3g of 2 times f prime of 2 minus f of 2 times 3g prime of 2 all over 9. That should be a 9, not a g. 2, 9, and then this is g of 2 quantity squared. All right, so that'll be 3. G of 2 is -1. F prime of 2 is -2 minus f of 2, which is 4, times 3 times g prime of 2, which is 2, all over 9 times g of 2. G of 2 is right here, and I'll just square it, and that'll be a 1. So this is going to be 6. Take away 24 all over 9, and that's going to be -18 over 9, which is -2. Stop the screencast and see if you can do the second one on your own. And here's the answer. And this is the end of the screencast.